Honda Passport or Toyota 4Runner? Which one should you buy? That's what we're going to find out. Welcome to Car Help Corner, where we help you, the consumer, master the process of car buying and car ownership. If you're looking to buy a large, spacious SUV with an off-road personality, the Toyota 4Runner and Honda Passport should definitely be on your radar. And after driving both of them back to back for the past couple of weeks, I'm going to tell you which of the two is the better SUV to go for. Now, even though both of these are considered mid-sized SUVs, very similar in terms of overall size, interior space, and both have that rugged off-road personality, there are some major differences between them. The Passport is manufactured in the United States, whereas the 4Runner is manufactured in Japan. The Passport is a unibody SUV, very similar to any other crossover or regular car, whereas the 4Runner is a body-on-frame SUV just like a truck. The Passport has a naturally aspirated V6 engine, whereas the 4Runner has a 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. And that's just the start. So let's begin with the 4Runner, starting with its drivetrains. Now, the 4Runner comes with two different drivetrain options. The standard engine is a 2.4-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder that comes connected to an 8-speed conventional automatic transmission. It produces 278 horsepower and 317 pound-feet of torque. Now, even though the 5th generation 4Runner was absolutely adored for its old school, naturally aspirated 4-liter V6 and 5-speed automatic transmission, which were bulletproof reliable, known to last pretty much forever, it definitely had its shortcomings as far as performance and fuel economy goes. And that's where this new drivetrain is quite a significant improvement. Fuel economy has improved quite a bit. It's now able to achieve between 19 to 24 miles per gallon, or roughly 10 to 13 liters per 100 kilometers. And not only is it more efficient, but significantly more powerful. Thanks to all the additional torque that you now get thanks to that turbocharged engine, it can move significantly quicker off the line. You just put your foot into it, and the punch that you get is immediately noticeable. In fact, the performance of this engine is so good that I really don't think there's any need to even bother considering the more powerful iForce Max engine option, which is basically a hybrid version of the same drivetrain. Toyota has added a hybrid battery under the rear seats and an electric motor that's sandwiched in between the engine and transmission. So it now produces 326 horsepower and 465 pound-feet of torque. Now, of course, that's a significant leap in power over the standard engine, but the odd thing is that you really don't notice the extra power when driving it normally on the road. And not only that, but because this is only a performance hybrid system, not a fuel economy hybrid system, the fuel economy numbers are more or less the same as the standard engine. So in the end, you're spending a lot more money to get a drivetrain that's no more fuel efficient, a lot more complicated, and not really more powerful in a meaningful way when driving it every day. So it's really not worth it. And another criticism I have of both drivetrains is that even though they have plenty of performance and are relatively quiet and do their thing without any fuss, you do definitely notice that at the end of the day, they are 4-cylinder engines. When you really put your foot into it and make use of that power, you can really feel the crudeness, the gruffness of that 4-cylinder engine that you just can't get away from. It's not a huge deal and it doesn't really ruin the driving experience, but it's definitely nowhere near as satisfying as having a proper V6. And that's where the Passport comes in. With the Passport, you get a naturally aspirated 3.5-liter V6 engine with a Honda-designed 10-speed conventional automatic transmission. It produces very similar power to the 4Runner, 285 horsepower and 262 pound-feet of torque. And oddly, even though it's a larger engine with more cylinders, the fuel economy is more or less the same. But the big thing with this engine is not the performance and not the fuel economy, it's the refinement. Having a V6 engine makes a big difference in an SUV like this. It's quieter, it's significantly smoother, and that really does elevate the whole driving experience. With that said though, having fewer cylinders doesn't really affect the capability of the 4Runner. In fact, it's the 4Runner that has the higher towing capacity of the two. It's rated to tow up to 6,000 pounds compared to 5,000 pounds with the Passport. But either way, both of these are excellent towing SUVs. Now, the powertrains are one thing, but how exactly do these two SUVs feel to drive on the road? Well, again, here we have another major difference between the two. As mentioned, the 4Runner is a body-on-frame truck-based SUV, and that does give it a very distinctive driving feel. It feels very truck-like, which means it is on the stiffer side, and the whole body feels a lot more jiggly and nowhere near as comfortable as a crossover-based unibody SUV like the Passport. The suspension is surprisingly stiff as well, but that really also depends on which trim that you get, because with the 4Runner, you can get 5 different types of suspension depending on the trim and also a variety of wheel sizes. The version that I'm test driving is the limited trim, which is one of the higher end ones with the larger 20-inch wheels, which has adaptive suspension. But I suspect that the ride quality would be a little bit better if you were to go with the base SR5 with the standard suspension and 17-inch wheels and thicker tires, or perhaps with the TRD Off Road, which also has smaller 18-inch wheels with thicker tires. In any case, it's certainly not the most comfortable SUV there is, and certainly nowhere near as comfortable to drive as the Passport. By comparison, the Passport is on a completely different level in terms of refinement and comfort. It is much smoother and quieter to drive. The body feels a lot stiffer and stronger thanks to that unibody construction. It's a lot more car-like in feel with better handling, and the level of comfort that you get is significantly higher. Now, could you live with the compromises of the 4Runner and drive one every day? Absolutely you could. But which of the two is ultimately going to be the more comfortable and the more relaxing, easier one to live with on a daily basis? No question, it's the Passport. But of course, the reason why the 4Runner is more compromised is because it's more of a dedicated off-road vehicle. With a dedicated off-road vehicle, you want to have that body-on-frame construction. And compared to the Passport, which has an all-wheel drive system with torque vectoring, the 4Runner gets a choice between a proper four-wheel drive system, either a full-time or part-time four-wheel drive, with a 2-speed transfer case and a high and low range. You can also get a locking rear differential, a sway bar disconnect system, and as mentioned, 5 different types of suspension depending on the trim you go with. The 4Runner also offers more choices and more flavors depending on what you're looking for. For example, if you're going for more of a light off-road vehicle, you could just go for the TRD Off Road trim, which comes with Bilstein suspension. But if you want a full-on hardcore off-road package, you could go for the top-of-the-line TRD Pro or Trailhunter trims, which come with either Fox or Old Man Emu suspension, plus a number of other off-road goodies. Now, both of these SUVs can handle a decent amount of off-roading. Both come with full metal skid plates underneath the body, plenty of ground clearance, and even all-terrain tires. But even though the Passport can do a decent job of some light off-roading and will be able to handle pretty much everything that the average SUV driver is looking for, it's definitely no match for the 4Runner. Now, let's get to how these SUVs compare when it comes to the interiors and interior space. Both of these are fairly large, mid-sized SUVs, and both have enormous cargo areas with plenty of room for your stuff. And underneath the cargo floor, with both you get a proper spare tire. The Passport is strictly a 5-seater, 2-row SUV, whereas with the 4Runner, you do have the option of a 3rd-row bench depending on which trim you go for. The 3rd-row seats are available with the standard engine, not the hybrid engine, and only on certain trims. But even though it is nice that the 4Runner offers an extra pair of seats in the 3rd row, it is worth knowing that they are extremely tight seats and really only suitable for small children. What is nice about both SUVs is that both have a very good interior control setup. You have very straightforward infotainment touchscreens with a really good user interface. On the Passport, you have a 12-inch touchscreen, whereas on the 4Runner, base models come with a smaller 8-inch screen, but most other trims come with a much larger 14-inch touchscreen, which is a nice upgrade. And both vehicles do have really nice control setups for all of your HVAC controls, which are very straightforward and easy to use. The interior of the Passport does seem to have better storage space with more storage areas around the interior, and it does seem to have slightly better fit and finish with better use of materials. With that said, the 4Runner is still very well made, and I really like the fact that it has better, more color choices to choose from, and you get a nice mechanical gear selector instead of a push button gear selector like you get in the Passport. Now, how do these two compare when it comes to pricing? Well, the Passport ranges in price between 46 to 54,000 US, or between 59 to 64,000 Canadian, including freight, but before dealer fees and sales tax. And as for the 4Runner, well, with the standard engine, the pricing ranges between 43 to 59,000 US, or 56 to 71,000 Canadian, so fairly comparable to the Passport. But if you go for the higher trims with the optional hybrid drivetrain, the pricing is quite a bit higher, ranging between 60 to 70,000 US, or 70 to 86,000 Canadian. So both of these are very expensive SUVs, but with that said, I do think both offer fairly good value for what they are. Ultimately, both of these are very desirable SUVs, very popular, and have very strong resale value, which does help out with that pricing just a bit. Also helping with that resale value is the fact that both of these SUVs do have strong reputations as far as reliability is concerned. Historically, that's where the 4Runner has always been best. In fact, the previous generation with its 4-liter V6 was known for being one of the most reliable, longest lasting SUVs that you could buy. And although it's unlikely that this new model will live up to that reputation, this should still be a very good SUV for long-term ownership as long as you maintain it properly. Yes, it does have a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, which for most is not going to be as desirable as a naturally aspirated 6-cylinder like you get in the Passport. But for what it's worth, Toyota does have a good history with this engine. It has proven to be quite solid so far. It does have both direct and port injection, and it does not have cylinder deactivation, which is nice. Now, Honda's V6 is certainly not perfect. It does make some concessions to emissions regulations like having engine start-stop, direct injection, and cylinder deactivation. And it is a timing belt engine, which means you will have to replace the timing belt every 100,000 miles or 160,000 kilometers. So really, there is give and take to both drivetrain setups, and ultimately I do think that both will be fairly comparable in terms of long-term reliability and longevity. So which of the two is it going to be, the 4Runner or the Passport? Well, this may seem like a somewhat obvious conclusion, but ultimately the 4Runner is designed for someone who's more of an off-road enthusiast. For someone that goes off-roading on a regular basis, it is the much better vehicle and the better platform to go with. I also like that it offers a lot more variants to choose from depending on your taste and what you're looking for, and I also like the fact that it is made in Japan. Toyota really did a pretty good job of maintaining everything that the 4Runner is good at while making light improvements where it was needed. But between the two, it's definitely the more challenging SUV to live with on a day-to-day basis. It's nowhere near as comfortable to drive as the Passport is. And after driving them back to back for the past couple of weeks, that reality became immediately noticeable. Ultimately, the Passport is not only the more comfortable SUV to live with on a day-to-day basis, it's also the more pleasant one to drive, thanks to the much nicer V6 engine and just the overall design and layout. And even though it might not be quite as capable off-road as the 4Runner is, for at least 95% of buyers, this is going to be the perfect compromise between having a large, spacious SUV that has the look and feel of an off-road vehicle, but with the day-to-day livability and comfort of a regular crossover. And I think that's a really attractive combination. So as much as I like the 4Runner, for me, the Passport is ultimately the more well-rounded choice to go with. So after watching this comparison video, which of the two would be your choice? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you're planning to purchase a vehicle and you live in Ontario, know that OMVIC is the vehicle sales regulator that's responsible for administering and enforcing the rules that dealerships must follow. To learn more about your consumer protection rights, visit omvic.ca. And if you need any additional car buying advice, recommendations, or help with getting a great deal on your next new car purchase, make sure to visit carhelpcan.com. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next time.